Well, it's official, you guys. I have a new obsession, and that is Chinese steamed buns, also known as baozi or simply the bao. And it's not actually one single dish we're talking about here, it's more of a family of fluffy, delicious treats. For example, in the northern Chinese city of Tianjin, we have the famous gobuli, which is pretty much a steamed soup dumpling. Then further down south in Shanghai, you have shengjianbao, which are like semi-fried and semi-steamed, really cool. And then even further down south, you have the Cantonese chashiu bao, which is saucy and sweet and has this very special texture, so just to name a few. But before we even start looking at those more localized varieties, I think it would only be appropriate to first master the basics, and that means the plain, the humble street food bao. You know, the kind that you can not only find all over China, but in pretty much every single grocery store all over Asia. But not in here, so I gotta make it myself. And you know, basic doesn't necessarily mean easy. The objective is nothing less than a fluffy, clean, even exterior that's still strong enough to support a tender, juicy meatball inside. And on top of that, the ratio between dough and filling has to be just right. Well, I just so happen to have spent the entire past week figuring those very things out. Plus, I found a somewhat unorthodox way to make the buns really, really white, and also a hack to make, you know, folding everything into a bun actually doing the act of folding baozi so much easier. So let's actually get cooking and I'll share what I found out. We'll begin by making a basic pork and leek filling. You can use any other minced meat or even the vegan substitute. But first you want to mince the white part of the leek and fry it low and slow until golden brown. Strain and then keep both the fried leeks and the super fragrant oil. Now, I like to season the meat with grated ginger, the finely minced green part of the leek, salt, sugar, oyster sauce, soy sauce,
料酒 aka 绍兴 wine,
a few cracks of white pepper, and a barely noticeable amount of 5-spice powder. This is all the flavor we need, but to add juiciness, we want to add some water. Getting this water absorbed by and emulsified into the meat will require a special technique. Grab something sturdy like a bunch of chopsticks and then keep stirring the meat mixture vigorously in one direction only until it turns very pasty, sticky, and sticky. Oh, my script is off. But once you're there, this is the time to add oily components, namely our fried leeks, the oil from the fried leeks, and a little drizzle of sesame oil. I also like to add some starch, which helps getting a tender meatball and also keeping the juices inside that meatball. Whisk again, and now, yeah, it's gonna get really sloppy as your mixture almost turns into a smooth meat mousse. I'm adding the mixture into a tray. You could use a bowl, but a tray is faster because I'm covering this and popping it into the freezer to firm up. This actually brings us to my first baozi revelation. We want a juicier filling, but the juicier the filling, the softer it will be. And that will make it more difficult to actually handle while you're wrapping your bao. So to get it into a more workable state, you want to keep the filling as cold as possible. Because the colder the meat will be, the firmer it will be, and that's going to help you a lot down the line. In fact, after chilling it for about 1 hour, I used my hands to shape the filling into a ball, any size you prefer. And you know what? I even had the ludicrous idea of filling an ice cube tray with the meat filling, yes, which actually turns out to be a really convenient way of getting super equal meat cubes, I guess. Pop everything back into the freezer, so now we can begin working on our dough. Now, traditionally, sourdough would have been the way to go here. However, that applies to most recipes because commercial yeast is a pretty new invention. Anyhow, I recommend using instant yeast for baozi. It's just so much simpler and more reliable. Just a pretty basic yeasted dough. All-purpose flour, salt, some instant yeasty, and some sugar to keep it busy. Combine into this sort of baozi base mix, which I made because it's perfect for working in batches. Now let's hydrate a portion of this mix. Somewhere between 50 and 55% water is ideal for me. Give everything a good knead and proof a first time for at least 1 full hour or until roughly doubled in size, after which you want to thoroughly press all the pockets of air out of it, which is going to give us a more even interior texture. Normally now you would make your actual bao and then you would proof them a second time and steam them, and we'll get to that. But I actually made this first batch to conduct a little experiment. I want to understand what that second rise after the shaping actually does. So I made 4 equal balls and steamed one right away and then one of the others every 30 minutes. And the results kind of speak for themselves. The one I put directly on the steamer is very dense and doughy. 30 and 60 minutes look pretty good, but on the 90-minute one, you can start seeing these overproofed bubbles. A highly sophisticated smell test may or may not have confirmed the young ball smells doughy and the old ball smells slightly boozy, while the two in the middle just got that nice yeasty going on. So 45 minutes for the second rise is what it's gonna be for me, but you know, working with things that are alive, such as yeast, is always a little bit unpredictable, so you know, it's gonna depend on your environment. You gotta give the dough enough time to get fluffy, but not enough time to get soggy again. That's what's gonna give you those baozi that just look so plump. There are also two other things I noticed when inspecting my results. First, I actually want a little bit more puff in my buns, but I don't want more yeast. So I'm gonna add a small amount of baking powder to my next batch, which is a little bit untraditional, but in my opinion, an improvement. And also, please take a look at the color. They look good, but they're not like white. And I don't know why, but that's something I really want. A lot of times how they do it in commercial products is using bleached flour, which happens to be banned in my country and many others due to health concerns. But you know what is not banned in my country despite health concerns? Let me show you. Titanium dioxide. Quite literally the whitest substance. I don't think there's much of a point in showing this to the camera. It's just very white. Oh my god! Oh shit, I got titanium dioxide all over. Surprisingly, this is quite inexpensive and widely available online. And you know, there is definitely some dispute about this stuff too, but it seems to be fine to use in food. You will often find it in pastries like cakes and stuff, and also in toothpaste, which I guess is something that goes in your mouth as well and could be swallowed. I don't know about you, but I have definitely eaten small amounts of toothpaste as a kid. Anyhow, I'm trying this out for science, aka the YouTubes, so if you decide to use this stuff as well, just please educate yourself first. Now, I'm not gonna lie, putting titanium in my buns does not only sound super badass, it does indeed give me an incredibly white dough. I don't know how well you can see this on camera, but it's freaky. Cut off pieces of dough, roll them into balls, one for each bao obviously. You then want to first flatten those into a disc and roll the edges of that disc out thinly while leaving a thicker pillow for our delightfully solid filling in the middle of the wrapper. This is gonna be very important if you want to make an even bao. Now, for the folding itself, hold the unwrapped bao in one hand, then make one fold on the side and start pleating your way around the bao. I will actually link a video in the description that shows this process really well and done by an actual professional. And by the way, do you know what really helps during this step? Yeah, having a firm filling that doesn't jiggle around as much. You're welcome. And just one word here, don't worry if your bao don't look perfect. You know, the only thing you gotta take care of is that they're sealed properly, because if they're not sealed properly, juices will be leaking out. Now, once your bao are done, you wanna put them on little sheets of baking paper and rest them in a steaming basket, which we're gonna place on a pot with warm, barely steaming, but not hot water, and cover everything with the lid cracked open. The purpose of this step is that, of course, we have just filled the bao with extremely cold filling. You know, that's the downside of this method. It's gonna slow down the natural rise of the bao. So we're counteracting that by putting it in a warm environment, but at the same time, you know, leaving a little bit of a crack there for the air to circulate. And that will actually help to create a little bit of a skin around the bao, which will help maintain the pretty shape. Deep. And speaking of shape, while we're giving the bao their final proof for 45 minutes to an hour, let's talk about ratio. I actually already made a secret batch with those ice cube tray meatballs where I wanted to find out how much dough is the right amount. For a 20-gram meatball, I went with 75% dough by weight, that's 15 grams, and then all the way up to 200% in 5-gram increments. I found all of them acceptable, but I personally prefer the middle to low results the best, so anywhere between 100 and 150% dough to filling by weight. And speaking of personal preferences, I actually like my baozi a little bit smaller, so my recommendation would be using 30 grams of filling and then 40 grams of dough. Guys, these were seriously the whitest, the fluffiest, the most perfectly proportioned baozi I have made for sure, and perhaps ever had. And I highly recommend you guys try those at home. So Stay safe and healthy, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.